Okay, everyone, welcome back to the White One Auto YouTube channel, and we are here to answer another question. So the question was asked about me, what are the fitment issues with putting a 4L80E, which this here is a 4L80E, and this here is a Turbo 400. So essentially a 4L80E is just an electronically controlled overdrive version of the Turbo 400, but it is a lot bigger. So this is a Turbo 400 with a short tail shaft on it, and if we go from the top of the bell housing down to where the transmission ends, you're about 29 and a quarter. And if we do the same thing over here, you will be about 32 and 3/4. So you have the extra length that is involved with both transmissions. But also the other issue is just the sheer mass of this transmission. It is higher, it is wider, and in the 96 and up versions, which I would recommend you get, the coolant lines are in a different position. So whereas on a Turbo 400, your cooler lines are over here on the passenger side by the dipstick. On the 96 and up versions of 4L80Es, which I would recommend you get if you were getting the cooler lines, still on the passenger side, but one is right here, which is a regular style, and the rear one is at the rear, and it takes a special style fitting where you see where it has like a shaft on it to provide lube deeper into the transmission. So, just due to the sheer mass of this transmission, this most likely will interfere with your floorboard. But if you see how this is a banjo style fitting where you would screw this in and then a banjo adapter slips onto here, and then that would allow you to get your transmission lines a lot closer to the transmission. So that is one plus. Typically, I have put these in Chevelle's, G-bodies, not a first generation Cutlass, but Chevelle's, G-bodies, B-body Impalas like 78 through 89 Caprice Impalas. You just have to massage the floor, just dent the floor in a little bit, and you can make this fit. Typically do make my own transmission cross member, but they do have some available for A bodies and G bodies. I don't typically run this style of dipstick with them. I would typically run a low car style dipstick because that would allow me to run this a little bit closer. A lot of people don't like the low car style dipsticks because they have an adapter to fill in and say they're a pain, but I don't really see an issue with them. The major issue with going to a 4L80E is just physically making it fit in the car. The other issue is that you have to control this thing. So if you're not running fuel injection and that fuel injection controller doesn't have a transmission controller, then you have to figure out a way to control the transmission. Now you can use a Transgo kit to convert this over to manual shift, and it will still give you the overdrive. That is an option. But most of the time, if you're putting a 4L80E in your car, you want to use it automatically shifted. So the TCI controller I've used. There are a few other ones that I don't have personal experience with, but either with my personal experience, it's either been a TCI, a Holley ECU, or a factory ECU commanding it. So if you're running this in a carbureted style engine, you do need to get a throttle position sensor. So you will need that and a way to mount that to your carburetor. But essentially a 4L80E is a great upgrade. I definitely would recommend doing it because this thing will get you overdrive. I think if you only had a 355 gear, I'm not really sure if overdrive is needed for that, in my personal opinion. But hey, it will allow you to run a 411, a 410, a 456 and get overdrive. You can run a lockup or non-lockup style converter, so that can help increase your fuel economy. And these things are very, very strong, just like 480Es are very strong. Like these things will hold up to 500 horsepower all day long in a stock, good working condition. So another benefit of that is if you're able to get one of these out of a running, driving van, a van is probably your best candidate for it in our area. A lot of vans have 480Es in it, and if you get one that works or one that has been remanufactured, you can put this thing in your hot rod, and if you make less than 5 to 600 horsepower in its stock form, it'll most likely hold up for you very, very well. The one thing that does get tricky with a 480E, well not tricky, but I would say expensive, is if you do need an upgraded converter. If you have a very radical camshaft, you are going to have to upgrade the converter, or just to make it optimum with your combination, you will need to upgrade the converter. I like Circle D converters myself. I prefer to get the one with the billet hub. I have used others and they've worked out fine, but the only product I could say for certain that I know will bat you out of the box 99% of the time is a Circle D. I have had a few cars come in where they've had 480Es and have had other converters in them, and the converters were actually the issue. And thankfully thank God, we were able to catch it quick enough to where it didn't damage the transmission, and we could just get a new converter for it and drain and fill the fluid, and everything worked out fine. But I would say the key thing I see missed a lot is people want to run AN lines. So this is what a typical fitting would look like. It doesn't have that long shoulder, and this is what one does. So you see it has that shoulder. You should not put a fitting like this here in the rear. It should definitely have that shoulder on it, because you need to lube the transmission correctly the way GM designed it, unless you're gonna go to re-engineering it. So that's the most common thing I see where people miss is they don't have that correct fitting back there. And other than that, I think it's just a good general hot rod swap. You know, you're gonna have to beat your floor plan up a little bit, either make you a cross member, or there are tons of companies that'll make you one for a lot of popular applications. And then running your electronics and your shifter linkage. So your shifter linkage is over here. I typically use like a low car shifter for that. Let me grab the camera and show you what I'm talking about. So your shifter linkage, where your shifter would bolt up, is over here. And this is the remnants of a low car kit for a column shift. So you can still run this with a column shift. Low car makes the kit. That works great. And it's also got like a nub on it where like you can hook up your Dakota Digital GSSS. So you can hook this up and still run your column shift and have a 480E in there, and you don't have to run a floor shifter. So that is another thing that you want to know about. This is your transmission connector right there. These are speed sensors. So your controller will let you know how to hook all of this stuff up, whichever controller that you go for. So another thing is you will have to shorten your drive shaft, and depending upon what you're switching from, you're probably gonna have to get a whole new drive shaft made. So it is a little bit of an expensive swap, because you got the cost of the transmission, a controller if you need that. If you're not gonna run the converter that came in it, a converter, a transmission cross member, which most hot rodders, I think you could fab that thing up. And a drive shaft is probably the real only thing that you would have to source out, is getting the drive shaft either cut or modified. But I think doing the swap is definitely worth the money if it is a car that you drive a lot, you know, because these things are very, very strong. So I hope that answered all your questions. Thank you guys for watching. White One Auto.